Hey guys, it's Kasey here. I have a whole bunch of stuff out today and we're gonna learn some simple basics about cooking. One thing that I like to start off is the basics. We start with basics and we build on that. So today we're gonna make a homemade bruschetta. Very simple ingredients, but what we're focusing on in this is how to have some proper knife skills. And that's something really important in the kitchen that I don't think a lot of us home cooks know. And it's super important because it's really dangerous. So I'm going to go through little things with our tools, with certain tricks of the trade from the industry that help us as working moms do things faster. And I know how crazy life gets. I have 3 kids of my own, so trying to make really fun, delicious meals for not only them, but for me as well after a hard day is super important. And I love food, so keeping it organized is really where I want to go with you guys. So first and foremost, in the restaurant industry and as a trained chef, the first thing that we ever learned in the culinary industry is how to properly organize ourselves. And we call this in French a mise en place. It means everything in its place. And so before I start any of my recipes, I always make sure I have all of my equipment and utensils out, and then I pull out all of my ingredients. And the reason that we do this is to make sure that I'm not wasting time going back and forth to the refrigerator or going back and forth to my cabinets, because when we're working with food, it gets really messy. And especially right now with everything that's going on in our world, we have to make sure that we eliminate cross-contamination and we stay really clean when we work. So taking food product and putting it in our drawers, it's something that we want to avoid. So keeping everything out as we need it is really important. So as you see here, I have my final tray once my product is all done and we get to eat it. Then I have a bowl here to mix all my ingredients. I have my cutting board, which is nice and clean. My utensils, this is a microplane, which I'll go through. And then I have 2 different knives, and I'm kind of bougie on my knives, so I'll explain those when we get there. And then one little trick of the trade I wanted to show you guys is a lot of times in the kitchen, our cutting board keeps moving, and they have some fun gadgets to boards that don't move, but you can get a really good bamboo cutting board, and I love bamboo because you can clean it really well. But to prevent it from moving, you just put a damp towel or paper towel underneath, and that will prevent your cutting board from moving. Okay, so we're going to talk about our utensils, which are really important. And like I said, I'm kind of bougie when it comes to my knives, but it's really proper to use the right knife for the right thing that you're doing. And we're cutting some vegetables here today. We're also going to cut bread, so we have 2 different knives. This is my chef's knife. My utility knife, so I use it for the majority of what I do, cutting vegetables and prepping in that manner. I don't use it for cutting proteins. That's a completely different story. But then I have my serrated knife here, and this is really good to cut bread. So it just helps you easily cut the bread without straining yourself or also ruining the integrity of the actual bread. And then last, what we have for what we're doing today, this is a microplane. This helps get really fine cuts of product without having to sit here and chop, and it once again saves time. So using your proper utensils to get expedited prepping, that's really what you need to do. Okay, so now we're talking about our ingredients. Once again, I have all my mise en place, but we're gonna start off with bread. I really love Publix French bread, so we got a French baguette. Always use the baguette the day that you get it, because Publix bakes it fresh every day. If you let it sit another day, it gets a little stale. So in the instance that you have it from a day old, you can toast the bread, but we're gonna use it raw because I really like the crunch from the outside and it's really chewy on the inside. So we have our French baguette. After our baguette, we have our main vegetables in the bruschetta is gonna be your tomatoes. So I like beefsteak tomatoes, or if the store has heirloom tomatoes, I love heirloom tomatoes, but they didn't have that. So we're gonna roll with beefsteak tomatoes. When it comes to your tomatoes, I personally like them just a little bit harder, like very, very slightly underripe. 2 reasons. 1, it's very easy to cut. And 2, I'm not a fan of a mealy tomato, so I tend to see when they're kind of underripe, if you will, they're not as mealy, but it's your preference. We have some basil, because basil and tomatoes is really fantastic together. I wanted to add a little bit more greenery and a subtle onion flavor, so I picked some scallions. I love scallions, I love everything that they bring to a dish, and it helps add and marry these beautiful red and green colors together. And then we also have some garlic. I'll talk more about garlic when we start chopping this up, about why I prefer to use the whole garlic as opposed to the peeled garlic that you can get from the store. But it's up to you, it's your preference. I just always prefer whole garlic, and I'll talk about that later. I have an option to add an avocado. This isn't something that always goes into a bruschetta, but I like the avocado because once again, it gives you some beautiful flavors, and I can show you a good tip on how to cut avocados because I know that a lot of us are kind of intimidated, or maybe we had an injury because they're not the easiest things to cut. Salt and pepper, always great. Love fresh cracked. It just lends for a bigger, bolder flavor, and you can limit the amount that you put in there, but I hate table grind, that's already cracked. We have some kosher salt here. Morton's kosher salt is really good. And then we have some extra virgin olive oil, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of fig balsamic glaze, which is really good. So it adds a little bit of sweetness to the tartness of the vinegar. So we have our diced tomatoes here, and if you saw, I took out the core and I put it in a compost. I am such a hippie, and I really think that anything that comes from the earth should go back to the earth. Plus I have a garden, so it really helps my garden at the end of the season. So I have a little compost bin, and when that's full, we put it outside. But next we're gonna chop the garlic. And if you remember, I talked about how I prefer to use whole garlic instead of the pre-peeled stuff. But remember, I know that we're all stressed as moms, so if the pre-peeled stuff is easier for you, go for it. But the reason that I prefer whole garlic is because when you have the peeled garlic, if it's been sitting in your refrigerator for a while, it starts to ferment, and that's where some of us get bubble gut. It's because the garlic has been sitting in your cooler fermenting. So I feel that if you get the whole bowl, as much of a pain that it might be, it just stays fresher, and then it's not as potent of a garlicky flavor as well. So to peel the garlic, you literally just stick your finger in there and break a clove off of that bowl. And we're only gonna use one clove here because that's a really big one. So the way to peel this, you're not gonna sit here and try to peel it like an onion because that would take forever. So you just take the back of your knife, make sure that the garlic is secure on there, and you're going to hit it down. And as it breaks open, the oils release the garlic, and it allows the peel to come right off, which is awesome. There's two different sides. You have the end and then the core. We don't want to use that core end, so we're gonna hold it, and now we're gonna use our microplane. And ladies, this is what they use on our feet when we get a pedicure, so just to let you know. So we're going to hold our garlic, and we're gonna grate it on this microplane. And instead of sitting there and chopping it, look at how nice and fine that is. And it also allows to not have these big chunks of garlic in your bruschetta. So we're gonna cut our basil right now, and the cut that we're gonna do is called a chiffonade. You don't have to get this fancy, you could just chop it if you want, but if you want those little ribbon-like textures, that's called a chiffonade cut. So you basically just stack the leaves onto each other and you roll it up like a little burrito. And then make sure when you grab any of your food when you're cutting, pull your fingertips in. And I always say keep the bears in the cave when you're cutting. And you hold your knife, make sure you hold it sturdy, and you use the forefront of your hand right here to guide the knife. And you're gonna rock your knife back and forth from the tip to the end, the tip to the end, the tip to the end. We're gonna cut our bread, like I said, using the proper utensil. I have my serrated knife. This, it just allows me to saw through it without having to press down the bread. So I keep that really nice outer crust and then that chewy inside. So I'm gonna cut it on a bias, which means on an angle. So this is just for little snacks for later. Kind of sawing through instead of doing that rocking motion on my bread, so I don't press it down and lose the integrity of that bread. Last, we're gonna cut our avocado, and then we get to assemble, and our bruschetta is done, so it's nice and quick. To cut your avocado, lay it on its side and take your knife and put it through the top until it gets to the core. And then you're gonna spin the avocado around until it gets back to that first incision. You'll twist it and then it'll take it apart. When you have your seed, just lay it down on the cutting board, and I like to hold it, but I don't recommend if you're new to avocados to hold it. And just take your knife and hit it, and then you'll turn and it should come out, but of course it doesn't, but it should come out whole. And then to get this off, just slip it off the knife right there. Okay, so when you have an avocado, you could do one of two things. You just squeeze it out if it's ripe enough. There's also an avocado cutter, which I really recommend if you're not very handy with a knife, or if you just want to go faster. But I've been doing this for years, so we've had to do many of these on a daily basis. So we're just gonna very carefully cut till we feel the skin on that knife, and we're just gonna keep cutting. And this gives us nice slices. And as we go all the way down, and you can remove this two different ways. You can either peel the skin off, or I like to take a spoon and I just scoop it out. And go right on our bread. Okay, we're gonna season our avocado. Once again, all the basic ingredients that we have, just a little bit of olive oil right on top, and a little bit of fat on fat, it's okay. But I love the olive oil flavor, just that soaks up into this bread. So just pour a little bit. And then we'll take some kosher salt. I always believe in layering your flavors. So every time you take a bite, it doesn't just taste like bread or just like avocado or just like the bruschetta mixture. Every single flavor is layered. And then we're gonna season with a little bit of kosher salt. Always season high, because as the salt falls, it will cover more surface area as opposed to if I was closer to the product. With our bruschetta. You can add mozzarella to this if you'd like. I think we have plenty of fat in there, so I'm not going to. Just go right over top. Don't forget to get the juice on top of that to soak into the bread. That's the whole part of the bruschetta.